each night for me till we meet again.
Oh, my golden slippers, them laid away, kids, I ain't going to wear 'em till my wedding day. And the long-tailed coat that I love so well, I'll wear it in the church in the morning. And my long white robe that I bought last June is going to get changed, case it fits too soon.
Within the town of Villisca, Iowa, businesses were thriving. Throughout the town, there were several hotels, restaurants, and stores. If someone needed a job, there was one ready for anyone. And just a couple miles away, you would hear the trains rolling past Villisca. Within the town lived Josiah and Sarah Moore and their 4 children. Josiah came from a huge family and worked as a clerk for Frank Jones, a Villisca resident and the Iowa State Senator. Frank Jones owned a hardware store by the name F. Jones Hardware, an implement dealer. Josiah would then venture off into his own business, where he became a competitor and took business away from Frank Jones, and he had secured a franchise with John Deere. Josiah was also a well-known worker within the church. His wife, Sarah, was a housewife. She played piano for the town church. They had 4 kids, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul. The Moores were a loved and respected family throughout the town.
Oh, them a golden slippers, oh, them a golden slippers, them a golden slippers, well,
June 9th, 1912. It was a normal Sunday for the Moores. Sarah took the kids who were attending their church and led them through the Children's Day program exercises. Sarah and Miss Hughes worked with the children on a special service that would be presented at church that night. After the morning service, the Moores went and visited Josiah's parents, like they did every Sunday. Around 6:00 p.m., Blanche Stillinger received a call from Josiah asking if her 2 sisters, Lena and Ina, could stay the night since they were going to church with them and he didn't want them walking back late at night. Blanche gave permission since their mom was outside and the girls made it to the Moore home. Around 8:00 p.m., the church bells rang, and the Moores attended the evening service. The Children's Day program came to an end, along with the service. The Moores stayed a little longer after to help make flower bouquets for the sick. Sarah also walked a family who lived just across the street to their home. The Moores headed home along with the Stillinger girls around 10:00 p.m.
Call me thou own. Oh, I wish I had someone to live with. 'Cause I'm tired of living alone. Oh, please make me tired.
The Moore household was quiet. Josiah's clerk, Ed Selly, tried to call him, but there was no answer. He would also try to call Josiah's relatives to ask about where he was, and nobody knew. Their neighbor, Mary Beckham, began to get worried when she didn't see the Moores during their normal morning routine. She noticed the kids never left for school, and the animals haven't been fed. Mary was disturbed by the stillness of the house. She would try to look inside, but the windows were covered, and the doors were locked. Mary then called Josiah's brother, Ross, around 8:15 a.m., and when he arrived, He unlocked the door and walked through the house, smelling a blend of copper and blood, ultimately finding an arm dangling off a bed covered up with a blanket, and the blanket was covered in blood. Then Ross called the town marshal, Henry Horton, who broke down the door when he arrived. While walking through the house, he looked in every bedroom and saw the family. He walked out of the house and said, "Somebody was murdered in every bed." All of the faces were covered up by various items of clothing. Josiah was attacked to the point where he was unrecognizable. Sarah was attacked with the blunt end of the axe. The killer then went through the house and found the Moore children, killing them. Then they went downstairs and killed the Stillingers. Once done, the killer went back to the parents' room and attacked them more, hitting Josiah nearly 30 times. Reports say his eyes were gone and the killer left everyone else unidentifiable. The neighbors reported they didn't hear any cries throughout the night. Reports say that Lena, who was 12 years old, had a kerosene lamp aimed at her, revealing her in a sexual pose. There was blood smeared along her legs and defensive marks along her arm, indicating she was the only one who tried to fight back. Gouge marks were found across the bedroom ceiling due to the upswing of the axe, since reports suggest that majority of the victims were attacked with the blunt end of the axe. Other reports say the marks could have been due to the killer spinning the axe in a one-handed frenzy. The axe used was the family's and was found in their backyard. The local officials lost control of the scene, where an estimated 100 people came to see the bodies. Reports suggest some of the people took pieces of Josiah's skull as a souvenir. The sheriff called the National Guard to come help with keeping the scene under control. They arrived at 10:30 a.m. During the early 1900s, fingerprinting wasn't an option, and with so many people around, it prevented the investigators from gathering sufficient amounts of evidence. Investigators found a couple of things the killer left behind. They found a 4-pound slab of bacon leaning against the wall with the axe, and they noticed that the killer searched through every dresser in the house to cover the mirrors and the glass within the home. There was also a plate of beans and a pail of bloody water. The investigators would have many suspects. The first suspect we will talk about is the Iowa State Senator, Frank Jones. Due to Josiah taking business away from him, that would be a clear motive. Except Frank Jones heard about the murders and walked down to the house like everyone else. He would ask the doctor nearby if the murders were true, and the doctor responded by saying they were. Frank would go to Ross and shake his hand and give his condolences. Everyone accused Frank of being the killer since the fallout between Frank and Josiah. Now comes Detective Wilkerson. In 1914, Wilkerson started looking into the case. He would look into Frank Jones. Everyone was sure Frank did it, including the Moore relatives and the Stillinger relatives, since he never gave any sympathy to the families. Wilkerson speculated by saying Frank hired people to kill the Moores, and that he gave the killers an escape route. Wilkerson would make a case against Frank in 1917, but it fell apart, and what happened during that case and in front of the grand jury is still a secret. Frank would never speak about the murders in the newspapers. He wouldn't speak about it in any interviews. He didn't say a word. The only time he did was in his autobiography, stating that Josiah was a gentleman, and there was never any friction between the two men. The next suspect is William Blackie Mansfield, a clerk who worked with Frank Jones, and he was upset about Josiah leaving. There was also a rumor that said Josiah had an affair with William's daughter-in-law. William would be detained and questioned for his involvement in the Villisca murders, along with the murder of his wife, infant child, father, and mother-in-law that happened in Blue Island, Illinois, on July 5th, 1914. Some believed he was responsible for other similar murders that happened recently, but William was able to prove he wasn't involved. He would go on to win a lawsuit against Detective Wilkerson. He believed William was the killer. William won the lawsuit with $2,225, which equals $65,000 today. He was not the killer. A couple days before the murder, the Reverend George Jacqueline Kelly came into town and was present at the Children's Day program, and then left town in the early morning when the Moore family was found. The Reverend would write letters and pretend to be a private investigator for Scotland in attempts to get inside the house. Around the same time, he sent a bloody shirt to a drugstore to get clean. The Reverend had a penchant for peeping in windows and was known as a firebug and confessed to arson. He suffered from mental illness and schizophrenia. The Reverend would leave the Midwest. He would settle in New Jersey, where he would be involved with the KKK. He died in 1959 in Islip Hospital, which was a notorious psychiatric hospital. He was not the killer. The next suspect was S.A. Andy Sawyer. He was in Villisca the night of the murder, and when he heard about the murders, he left town to avoid any confrontation. According to Thomas Dyer of Burlington, Iowa, who was a bridge foreman and pile driver for the Burlington Railroad, Sawyer approached the crew and asked for a job and was given the job. The crew said that Sawyer was much too interested in the Villisca murders. Sawyer slept in his clothes and beside an axe, and often talked about the murders and how a killer was never found. After Sawyer's detainment, Thomas Dyer had testified, saying Sawyer was acting strange, and said he was walking behind Sawyer and found him rubbing his head and proceeding to jump and say, "I will cut your heads off," making striking motions similar to an axe. During this time, the crew drove to Villisca, and Sawyer showed them the supposed way the killer escaped by jumping over a box and crossing the train tracks. It turns out the night of the murder, Sawyer proved he was innocent because he was in Osceola, Iowa. He was arrested for vagrancy, proving he was not the killer. September 17th, 1911, Colorado Springs. 3 members of the Vernon family, May Alice and her 2 children, Nellie and John, were murdered with an axe. Then next door, the Wayne family, Henry, his wife Blanche, and daughter Lula had also been murdered. September 30th, 1911. Monmouth, Illinois. William Dawson, his wife Charity, and their daughter, Georgia, were beaten with a blunt object in their beds. October 15th, 1911, Ellsworth, Kansas. 5 members of the Schumann family, William, his wife Pauline, and their children, Lester, Vern, and Fenton, were murdered by the blunt end of the axe. June 5th, 1912, Paola, Kansas. Just a few days before the Villisca murders, Rollin and Anna Hudson were found murdered in their bed, killed by an axe. All of these murders have striking similarities. For starters, most of these crimes were committed with an axe, usually the blunt end. The mirrors and windows were covered by sheets and clothes found in the house. The victims had their faces covered, and there was usually a plate of food sitting out. Every family that was attacked lived about a mile away from the train tracks. Now, back to the suspects. Henry Lee Moore, who has no relation to Josiah or his family. Henry lived in Missouri and grew up troubled and would often visit various morgues in St. Louis. He kept a scrapbook of murder cases from the age of 8. He worked as a farmhand and is rumored to have fathered a child with the farmer's underage daughter. He had multiple run-ins with the law, which resulted in him being convicted of forgery in 1910, and he served time in a Kansas state prison, where he was released in May of 1911. A federal officer, M.W. McClary, suspected him of the Villisca murders because of the recent string of murders done by what was believed to be the same killer that killed in Colorado Springs. Within the same month of the Colorado Springs murders, Henry got a job working on a railroad. He was suspected for the murders in Colorado Springs, Monmouth, Illinois, Ellsworth, Kansas, and in Paola, Kansas. Henry Lee Moore was dismissed from the case. Detective McClary still believed Henry was the man behind 22 murders that happened throughout the Midwest, but he was never convicted of any of them, except on one occasion where Henry proposed to 16-year-old Queenie Nichols, and she said no, since he didn't have a place of his own. Henry would then go and kill his mother with a rusty coal axe. On March 18th, 1914, he was sentenced to life in prison. Joe Ricks was arrested in Monmouth, Illinois, when he stepped off a train where his shoes were covered in blood. What made him a prime suspect was on the day before the Villisca murders, the niece of Josiah and Sarah Moore, 16-year-old Faye Van Gilder, spoke to a man who was asking about where the Moores were located. They detained Joe Ricks not soon after this. This is a snippet from one of the news stories released during the time. Niece of the Moores assists in the hunt. They went to see if Miss Van Gilder could identify the man under arrest. There, as a man with whom she talked on the Saturday morning preceding the murders, the young woman related that she was accosted by a stranger who inquired where the home of the Moores was located. Later, when she told Mrs. Moore of the occurrence, the latter said a man answering the description of the stranger had hanging about their place. The Monmouth suspect, who gives the name of Joe Ricks, told the Illinois officers that he came from Clarinda, Iowa, a town 15 miles from here. In a separate news story, it reads this: Traces of fiend fade in the hunt. Monmouth, Illinois, June 15th, 1912. Joe Ricks, held here in connection with the Moore murder at Villisca, Iowa, is not the man Faye Van Gilder saw acting in a suspicious manner near Villisca a few days before the murder. Miss Van Gilder, who came in here today with her mother, Mrs. Emma Van Gilder, and District Attorney Ratcliffe of Villisca, declared as soon as she was brought face to face with Riggs that he was not the man. Riggs has given a fairly good account of himself to the authorities. He said that the blood-stained shoes he was wearing when arrested he had obtained in a trade from a tramp. This led to nothing. And the killer is still on the loose. The funeral, the 8 Villisca victims, was held within the town square on June 12th, 1912. There were 1,000 people in attendance. National Guardsmen blocked the street as the hearse moved through the town and made it to the firehouse where the victims' caskets would lay. The caskets weren't on display during the funeral and were taken later in the day to the cemetery.
A century-old unsolved axe murder, 8 people hacked to death, has intrigued 21st century forensic scientists and investigators and produced a fascinating documentary. We'll talk about that and a lot more coming. 8 people dead, 6 of them children, struck with an axe while they slept, their skulls crushed beyond recognition. The murder suspects include a power-hungry politician with a grudge, a sexually perverted preacher, and a mysterious killer who had struck before. No, this isn't the plot to a new Hollywood thriller. This is a true crime case at its worst. The newly released Villisca, Living with a Mystery, examines one of America's most violent unsolved crimes through a 21st century perspective. Kelly Rundle produced and directed the film, and Dr. Ed Epperly has been investigating these murders for decades.
What's that?
Kelly, boy, you really picked a fascinating case, and I understand when you went back and began to shoot this, there are still high emotions in the communities.
That's true. My wife and I produced the documentary, and one of the hurdles we had to cross was to gain the trust of the community. And people do feel a certain way about the crime, or tend to, depending on what their parents or grandparents told them about the case.
All right, this town in Iowa was a main stop on a railway line. Was one of the theories that there literally could have been a serial killer back there moving along the railways that happened onto this home and this family?
That is the theory that we sort of focused on. And we did visit a number of the other communities, and the crimes are strikingly similar. We don't, it's too much time has passed to really solve the crime definitively, at least given what we know now. But we did shed some new light on it through working with some forensic people.
Let me bring the good doctor in here. Ed, this must be fascinating, and I hate to use the term fun, but intellectually great fun to go back and try and put yourself in 1912 and figure this out.
Yes, it certainly is. I have really spent my lifetime working on this case, and there's not few things are as exciting as finding an old file and have the rubber bands that bind it fall to dust when you try to open it, and you realize that no one has looked at this for 50 years or more.
I wish we had more time, but it is a fascinating case. 5 seconds. Kelly Rundle, do you know who did it in your heart of hearts?
Well, as I say, we do explore this possibility that the murders were connected, and that's kind of the way we look at it.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, very much. Kelly Rundle, Dr. Ed Epperly.
As of recent years, investigators believe that the killer behind the Villisca murders was the same person behind the murders that happened in Colorado Springs, Monmouth, Ellsworth, and Paola. People believed that the killer would ride along the train to kill. Every family that was attacked lived about a mile away from the train tracks, giving the killer the name the Man on the Train, or also known as the Axeman. Some crime researchers believed that there were a total of 10 murders that happened along the railway tracks that all had similarities to the Villisca murders. Some theories suggest the Axeman killed around 90 people from the time of 1898 through 1912. Most of these investigators allowed Henry Lee Moore as a good suspect, since he was detained when these accidents started happening. A couple books were published trying to understand the story and to figure out what really happened. In 2012, a book came out by Troy Taylor called Murdered in Their Beds. The book explored all the murders that were similar to the Villisca murders, involving families in Texas, Colorado, and throughout the Midwest. Then, in 2017, another book came out by journalist Bill James called The Man on the Train. He theorized that all the murders could have been caused by Paul Mueller, a German immigrant. James managed to tie Mueller to axe murders that happened in Germany. James believes Paul ran back to Germany after running into trouble with the law on multiple occasions. Most people believe all these murders mentioned were done by the same man, the Axeman. But where he went will forever be unknown. But what he did will forever haunt the towns he visited and changed the life of many.
It's been 84 years since 8 bodies were found axed to death in this house in Villisca. A man named J.B. Moore, his wife, their 4 children, and 2 house guests were all found dead in their beds in June of 1912.
It's never been solved.
Darwin Lynn is turning the old Moore house into a museum. To him, the crime remains a mystery, but he does have his guesses.
J.B. Moore worked for Senator Jones. John Deere bought a building in Villisca and hired Moore away from Jones, a 9-year employee. So that's one of the theories that maybe Jones had a grudge.
The theory is the killer was hiding in this cubbyhole. Then he came out into this bedroom where J.B. Moore and his wife Sarah were sleeping. He took his axe and killed them as they slept, but that theory isn't cut and dried. And if you ask Nell Palmquist, she'll tell you most of the theories are hogwash. Nell was close to the accused Senator Jones' daughter.
He was a brilliant man, and he would never have done anything like that.
So when Darwin Lynn suggests the senator might be connected to the murders...
Well, he's wrong. He's off. Off right upstairs.
The one thing they do agree on is that this old house is full of history.
It is, kind of gives you an eerie feeling.
Oh, once in a while I have a funny feeling, but I think it's just a matter of thinking about it and what happened.
Many people owned the Moore house, but ultimately it was given to Darwin and Martha Lynn. In 1994, the Villisca house began renovations. At first, they wanted to make it a museum, and so they revived the home and put the house back together just like how it was when the Moores lived there. After this, multiple paranormal investigators started asking if they could visit and try to speak to the spirits there.
And 90 years ago, the unthinkable happened at this house. Our haunting memories still alive today. You be the judge in our prime assignment. The Fox 42 News starts now.
Fair, balanced, first. This is the KPTM Fox 42 News at 9.
It's a crime that's gone unsolved for more than 90 years. An entire family and two of their friends hacked to death as they slept. And it all happened in the little town of Villisca, Iowa. The trial of one of the suspects led to an acquittal. Today, the only reminder of those troubling times is the house where the murders took place. Some think it's haunted. Fox 42's David DeJean and a group of metro area Ghostbusters uncover new evidence. Judge for yourself in tonight's prime assignment.
Is there anyone in this room with us tonight?
Talking to ghosts, feeling the heebie-jeebies.
Now, in the stairwell, people have felt like they've been pushed down the stairwell.
If ever a house had reason to be haunted, this would be it.
There's been some times that the energy's so strong it about knocks you off your feet.
I would not want to be here by myself sleeping, you know.
Welcome to the Villisca axe murder house. No electricity, no running water. It's as if time stands still in this small two-story Iowa farmhouse. It was over 90 years ago when two adults, all four of their children, and two playmates spending the night got butchered at the hands of an axe-wielding murderer. Please, no! Tonight, a group of Ghostbusters returns to their favorite haunt. Members of PRISM, which stands for Paranormal Research and Investigative Studies Midwest, collect evidence. This is what they've recorded on past visits. Watch as a closet door apparently closes on its own. That closet is up on the home's second-floor bedroom, the same room where children were murdered.
My name is Annie, and I have been here before. You guys keep calling me back. And I want to help you guys rest in peace. And we need to know who did this to you.
With the help of video cameras,
I'm going to take a picture.
flash photography, and audio. A night vision camera captures the closet door closing on its own again.
What's weird about that one is that it closed without, it didn't close the whole way. If it was pressure being created, you'd think the door would close shut. In this case, it closes and leaves like with force too.
To the right of your screen, I test the quality of the door by opening and closing it. It didn't seem to be out of balance. No loose hinges.
Are you scared of us now?
One theory is that the ghosts are children.
They were killed so suddenly that they do not know that they're dead. Thanks, sweetie. Can you close the door?
The woman's voice asks, "Hey, sweetie, can you open the door?" This is the response played back 3 times. Children's voices are strangely captured on tape a second time.
They're definitely children.
Strange voices, moving doors. Can the supernatural reveal who committed those heinous murders over 90 years ago? More importantly, can the dead be trusted to tell the truth? With photographer Jason Pressler and Justin Riviera, David DeJean, Fox 42 News at 9.
Today, the house is owned by a local farmer. He charges $50 a night per person to rent that place. So far, it is booked solid for the next 6 months.
From then on, the house turned into a profound spot for ghost hunters, and is now a tourist attraction where groups of 6 can stay the night within the house to experience their own paranormal encounters. It has been named one of the most haunted places in America.
Do you hear that? Do you hear that?
Do you want us to leave?
No way! Something was fucking in here! Yo, hey guys, holy shit!
Jesse, come in here. Yeah, dude. Oh my. Oh yes, there we go.
Maybe you could show us where you are. Whoa! Oh, I just caught that on camera! Oh! Dude, somebody was coming up the stairs.
Do you think that there is an evil spirit in the axe house?
It's not Villisca, it's Wallisca, which is Meskwaki for evil spirit.
Holy!
All of a sudden they wake up and everyone's dead in bed.
He's in the doll! He's in the doll! He's in the doll! Oh, this is gonna suck.
Is it an adult or a child that's communicating with us?
Child.
Oh my lord!
How you feeling, Christian?
Feels like there's something touching my ear.
Keep touching it.
Anyone have an EMF detector?
Oh, huge orb. Huge orb.
Take more. Take another pic.
This person look like who did this?
Preacher! No way!
That is insane.
We just captured audio of the murder happening. Few seconds later, felt him right there, felt him right there, felt him right there, and I felt just run through.
I had a girl
When?
when they were going outside.
So did I.
Her,
So did I.
It was.
Thank you for that noise. Good job, guys. Can you do it again? I really good film on corner Massey. Because I never chased them over there to the edge of the stairs. Like, I walked. Like 3 animals? No, like.
There was a film made about the murders.
Has delivered you unto me, and I will
But the film doesn't depict what truly happened. The film uses the murder as a plot point, but tells an entirely different story about kids breaking into the Villisca house and they end up getting possessed. But there's still more to this story. November 7th, 2014. Robert Stephen Larson visited with a few friends to do a paranormal investigation. Montgomery County Sheriff Joe Sampson says, "From my understanding, he was alone in the northwest bedroom, and the rest of the party was outside, and he called for help on their mobile two-way radios. His companions found him stabbed in the chest, an apparently self-inflicted wound, called 911, and Larson was brought to a nearby hospital. This event happened at 12:45 a.m., which is what most people suspect to be the approximate time their murders happened. There was no indication of foul play, and no reason found about why he did this." The events that took place on that night changed a town forever. A family who was loved and respected by all was taken in the night, leading the town into fear and paranoia about who was the monster that caused this. Blanche lost her sisters that night. The neighbors and families of the Moores had their lives changed due to the loss of friends and family. As the years passed on, nobody was able to get closure for this terrible event. Was it just one man, or was it the work of a twisted killer who just happened to stumble upon more victims to add to the list? Nobody will ever know. The Axeman was never found. Now, over a century later, the house is used as a tourist attraction. Is this the best way to keep the memories of this family alive? Who really knows the answer? More importantly, all of the victims and families mentioned today, may their souls rest in peace. So remember to always stay safe out there. Lock your doors and lock your windows. And don't be afraid to look over your shoulder every once in a while. We will see you next time.
Come to me, my melancholy baby, cuddle up and don't be blue. All your fears are foolish fancies, maybe. You know, dear, that I'm in love with you. Every cloud must have a silver lining. Wait until the sun shines through. Smile, my honey dear, while I kiss away each tear, or else I shall be melancholy too.